Welcome back to TinkeredDiesel Garage, and if you've made it to this video, it's probably because you're an angry housewife who's trying to figure out how much money her husband has been spending on his F100 Coyote swap project. Okay, all jokes aside, you're probably here because you have some aspiration to swap a Coyote motor into an F100 pickup truck, and you want to know how much it's going to cost you to do so. And it's a great idea for you to be searching the internet to try and find out how much other people are paying for Coyote swaps. Now, I've been doing this for a few years now, swapping Coyotes into F100 pickup trucks, and I've seen it all from people spending over hundreds of thousands of dollars and just buying chassis and buying motors, crate motors, used motors, getting ripped off, and spending way too much money on little miscellaneous parts that they don't necessarily have to buy. We're going to talk about how to do the wiring and be thrifty in doing so as well. We're going to talk about how to do your exhaust, how we're going to do the cooling system, fuel system. Do you want to do an interior system? All those things are going to play into the overall cost that you're going to spend on your Coyote. So if you're looking for great sound, great power, excellent steering, this video is going to really help you out, 100 trucks. So let's get started. So one of the first things you need to understand is, where do you want to start and where do you want to end with your build? Does it involve doing a full interior kit? Are you going to do the rear end? Are you going to do a front suspension along with the Coyote? Are you going to do a Crown Vic? Are you going to do QA1? All of these things are going to play into the overall number you're going to end up paying in the long run, and these things certainly add up. So for instance, look at this one. This one I did a patina build on. I didn't do the paint job on this one. Now I have done nice paint jobs in the past on other vehicles, but this one I decided the paint is, the theme I'm going for this is more of a patina truck, kind of like Pawpaw's truck. So you could look at this truck from the outside in traffic and you wouldn't know if that truck would just got done hauling a load of hay or not. But when you open up the doors, you see a very nice interior kit. Got dyno matting, some nice door cards, a really nice updated dash with great looking stitching, 3-piece seat here with center console and cup holder, Restomod air conditioning. All these creature comforts certainly add up. We've even got a really nice stereo system, and let me tell you, it sounds fantastic. We also sprang for an updated steering column. That's a Flaming River steering column, and those things unfortunately are not very cheap. But if you want all those bells and whistles, obviously the price is going to add up. So let's get into the details on what I spent on this truck, and then I'll give you some options on how to do successful Coyote swaps on a budget. Now, if you go through and look at the exterior of this truck, I was really going for this pawpaw look, and it makes it look like it could have probably went and got a load of hay and you wouldn't even have known the difference. And you would assume that it probably has like an old 390 motor in it or a straight 6, you know, the 306 in it, and you wouldn't know the difference until you pull up at a stoplight, and then I take off and blow your doors off with this close to 500 horsepower Gen 3 Coyote. So let's pop the hood and look at it. So if you look at the front bumper, I did update a couple things, like of course all the lenses are LEDs and LED headlights, and a new nice shiny bumper to give it a little bit of bling, but still allow it to look to, or allow it to have that kind of old school look and kind of weathered and beat up look. So it does suggest with some of the new parts on the front that it's been either upgraded or well taken care of, or there's something new about it that is interesting. All right, so let's go right underneath the hood here. So as you can see, we've got a Gen 3 Ford 5.0 Coyote motor in it, and this does have the 10R80 transmission, and I'm doing all kinds of really cool stuff, right? So I've sprung for the Fat Fender Garage ECU mount cradle case. It's got Restomod air conditioning. It's got the retro sound stereo system. It's got performance air raid intake, Willwood brakes. It's got What do we do for steering on this one? We've got the E-Pass electronic power steering in it, Crown Vic front suspension, fancy wiring and all that good stuff. And overall, we went a lot further over the top than what we needed to do this build here. But you get what you pay for, right? You want all the really great amenities, you're going to have to end up paying for it. But if you want to save some money and just have your stock truck the way it is, but swap in a modern Coyote motor, those things that's where the cost starts to add up. All right, so let's get into it. So remember I said there's going to be 5 different categories, but the first 3 are more going to be the DIY stuff. So that's assuming, but really there's 3 DIY and then 2 professional categories. So the first 3 are going to be if you bought an F100 or you already had an F100 that was maybe passed down from your grandparents or something like that, and you wanted to rebuild it and put a Coyote motor in it yourself in your own home garage. Here's 3 different cost scenarios that you could probably potentially be looking at. And it really depends on how big of a build do you want to do and what does your budget look like. So let's look at the first one. This would be a low budget. So this is base model. You've got an old beater F100, and I've seen some of these riding around, but you've got an old beater F100 that's barely hanging in there. It's all rusted out. It's probably got a lot of body problems, but you just want to put a Coyote motor in it and put the key in it and make it run. And honestly, there's guys that do that, and you can drive those trucks from East Coast to West Coast and back safely. I don't know about safely actually, but you can do it somewhat reliably because you've got a decent motor installed in it at that point. All right, so let's get into it. So let's assume, like I said, you got a beat up truck and you just want to do a Coyote swap and get it running, essentially. First, you got to go find a motor. So if you're going to go with the lowest budget motor you can get from a reliable source. Now, this is something like maybe some of the higher end eBay sellers, and there's a couple of them out there. Some of them you've got to wait 6 months to get one of these motors at this price, but they're out there. Now, I've seen guys on the internet in comment sections saying, I got my motor for $1,200. Okay, good for you. Those are fluke if it does run when you get it, but I wouldn't trust it. I would always get my motor from a reputable source. The number one place I get my motors from is Wade's Motorsports. Very, very reliable guy. Very easy to deal with. He'll ship all over the United States, all over the world if you want him to. And he warranties his motors. If you ever have a problem, you just call him up and he'll replace it. So he is very, very good to work with. But you've got the Parts Farm and you've got OK Auto Parts and you've got all these. They're good places. You can get motors from them. They warranty them. I would recommend going through one of them. But that's the biggest expense in this low budget Coyote swap. And really, the price is going to be $3,500. So you can pick them up, a Gen 1 high mileage, 110,000 miles on them, but you put the key in it and it's going to run, and maybe that's a crank-a-pallet or something like that. And generally, you're going to get all kinds of goodies with it. You get the O2 sensors, you get a transmission, you get a gas pedal, you get the engine harness, you get a radiator, an air intake, all kinds of stuff. And basically, almost everything you need to make that truck run, you're going to have it. So that's why I like going with those, kind of kits. I don't like the crank-a-pallets, but I do like getting just the motor or trans combo that you also get the ECU and you get the gas pedal. That's pretty much all I really need. I don't even take the radiators, but you could take that whole kit and install it, okay? And by the way, notice there's no labor on any of this up here, okay? There's no labor at all. This is assuming you did it yourself, all right? You got to have an engine harness or a body harness that you can install. So it's going to be either power by the hour. You can get them from Holley now. I think the Terminator X, they've got one for the Coyote, and you can get it from Ford Racing. Take your pick. Now here's a mistake that a lot of people make, and they end up spending a lot more money than what they need to. For instance, if they go buy one of those crank-a-pallets, and I don't even want to give any brands, but a crank-a-pallet kit that has everything you need, and basically it'll fire it up when they ship it on the pallet. Those have everything you need. You don't need to go buy a wiring harness because it comes with one. You don't need to go get your ECU tuned. You don't need to get a Ford Racing control pack. You've got all that stuff there. So If you don't need it, make sure you plan ahead in advance, because you may be buying stuff that you don't actually need. But when I get my motors, I just get the motor trends, the ECU, and the gas pedal. That's pretty much all you need. So I need to buy a harness. And generally, when I buy my motors, I go through Power by the Hour. They're very well tested. They sell a lot. They're very commercialized, and they sell a lot of their harnesses. And I've never really had a problem. I had one problem one time, but they fixed it quickly. But I've never really had major problems with their harnesses, and they're relatively cheap. So $1,800 for a harness. You're going to need engine mounts. Maybe you want some power steering. Now, because if you had power steering in your truck beforehand, when you take the old 390 motor out, or the 306, whatever you had in it, and you put in the Coyote, you might notice very quickly that there's no power steering pump on the front of that Coyote. So you're going to have to figure out a solution for that. And there's lots of solutions out there. You can go with an electronic Volvo power steering pump. You can go with a KRC pump. You can go with the Roadrunner front pulley system that comes with a power steering pump. Or you can go full electronic power steering, just like the Mustang has. That's if you're doing a Crown Vic swap. But let's say this budget build, now this is low budget. You're just gonna buy a KRC power steering bolt-on pump. That's $1,100. You need some engine mounts. Now remember, you're not doing a Crown Vic swap or none of that. You're keeping that cross member. So now you need some type of engine mounts. About $650. Let's say you're gonna go Fat Fender Garage to get their engine mounts, which they're pretty good. $650. You need a PCM bass tune. You got to get exhaust. Budget exhaust, assuming you're going to do some of the work yourself and you're just buying parts. And maybe like some Borla S-Type or Corsa exhaust or something like that. You're looking at $650. You need an air intake, unless you buy a cranker pallet. You need an air intake that has a MAF sensor that's MAF capable. Now these Coyotes are very sensitive when it comes to the MAF. You can't just buy any intake and think that it's going to work very well. You have to be very specific about which one you buy. You're going to want to buy a battery, right? You're going to need some miscellaneous electrical connectors, a battery tray, a drive shaft. You may need a radiator, power steering hoses, dash gauges, and a transmission linkage, and that'll pretty much package everything up you need to get a base Ford F100, like a bump side, like a 1970, up and running with a Coyote motor in it. And the grand total for all of this, wait for it, is going to be around $11,000. And that is going to give you a truck that you can go get a license plate, stick it on that truck, and drive it around as a daily driver. You're not going to have a nice stereo system. You're not going to have heat or air conditioning. It's going to be a bumpy ride. You're going to be riding on 50-year-old suspension. You're not even getting wheels and tires in this kit, right? That is just base model. So I hope that puts a lot of assumptions to bed there on like how cheap can you possibly do it? Can you do it cheaper than that? Sure you can. I wouldn't trust driving in a vehicle any cheaper than that. But that's a good do-it-yourself job. Okay, what's next? All right, now let's look at a mid-budget DIY Coyote swap build. And in this one, I'm assuming you're gonna get a pretty good Gen 3 with Coyote with a 10R80 transmission with roughly about 55,000 miles. And I'm seeing those, I'm actually buying them myself, like through Wade's Motorsports for around $8,000, $9,000, somewhere in there, depending on how new, how clean the motor is. You're gonna need the Power by the Hour harness, and on the Gen 3, if you're going with Power by the Hour, it comes with 2 harnesses. If you're not gonna buy the Ford control pack, but you just want the harness because you already have an engine harness because you bought it already when it came with the motor. So you don't need the air intake because you plan on doing something different with the air intake. All you need is the harness essentially, right? So you can buy that harness by itself, comes with all the connectors, the OBD2 port, PCM connectors, and it will be, for the Gen 3, it'll be 2 harnesses. It's a trans harness and a body harness. You need both of those, comes with a fuse box. All right, again, you're gonna need power steering, engine mounts, PCM, bass tune, air intake, battery. You're gonna need a bunch of electrical connectors, so I've factored in $350 there. Don't forget fluids. Most of the time when you get these engines, they drain all the fluids out of the transmission and the engine. So when you get it, don't crank that over without checking to make sure you got fluids in it. You also need coolant, you need brake fluid. Just factor in $200 to $400 depending on what fluid you're going to need. You need a radiator, power steering hoses, Dakota digital gauges. That's going to be the some different differentiator there in a mid-budget build. You may want to go with a nice gauge cluster kit. You may want to tie it into the computer using the BIM 0102 module. That's a couple $100 there. You're going to need trans linkage, and then here in this one, notice I'm putting in a Crown Vic swap. So it's like this one, we're assuming it's like a two-wheel drive truck, and you want to lower it. You want a nice, comfortable riding suspension. So you're going to put a Crown Vic in there. Factor in about $500 to upgrade brakes, new brake pads. $500 to upgrade that Crown Vic kit. On a mid-grade or a mid-budget DIY Coyote swap, you're probably going to want air conditioning and heating. I live here in the South, and it gets well over 100 degrees throughout most of the summer, and it is miserable driving a classic vehicle around this area in the Southeast without air conditioning. So it's no question any vehicle I have has to have very good air conditioning. But if you want it, you're going to have to pay for it. Factor in, with you doing the labor yourself on the air conditioning, about $2,800 or more, even $3,000, just to put Restomod air conditioning in a truck. Retro sound stereo. Obviously, you want to have nice tunes in a mid-budget truck. And if I'm doing a Crown Vic swap, I will almost always do an E-Pass electronic power steering from a Mustang. To me, getting rid of power steering fluid and power steering pumps altogether is the best thing since sliced bread. I will never go back on a Crown Vic. I'll never go back to putting fluid into a power steering system ever again, especially when you've got electronic power steering nowadays. And then, of course, you want a nice wheel and tire package. Let's tally this up, and up here you'll see a mid-budget build on, this is on the low end, $26,000 to $27,000. Not bad. And that is really, you know, pinching pennies where you can. A lot of times when I'm doing these, like on customer trucks and my own trucks, I try to wait for sales like Father's Day sales, you know, like Summit Racing and stuff like that. They'll all have these annual sales like Black Friday and everything, and try and buy if you know you got a project coming up, purchase everything you can and get those like 10% discounts and things like that. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for, high budget DIY Coyote swap 4x4. So listen, if you're doing a 4x4, just add $10,000 right off the rip. If you want 4x4 and you want that suspension to work, the 4x4 suspension, you want your Dana 80 or Dana 60 axles, front and rear, and you want it all to work push button with a Coyote motor. So there's a lot of stuff you can do here. And I ran into a lot of issues when I did my first 4x4 Coyote swap. It was fun, but a lot of lessons learned in the end, and man, did it hit the pocketbook. Now, these aren't actual numbers for my build, but these are because I was able to get a lot of this stuff, some of it for free, or greatly discounted, but this is like pricing that you would expect to pay if you didn't get freebies or discounts or anything like that. Again, you want a Gen 3 50 Coyote, and you want a 4x4 version. Those are generally a little bit cheaper, but you want to get one that's super nice. Now, this is a high budget build, right? So you want to get very, very low mileage. And I have a typo here where it says 55,000 miles, but it's really going to be like 12 or 15,000 miles on a real nice, clean engine or a clean drivetrain with 4x4 transmission. You want to get the Ford control pack for $2,500. Obviously, you want to put in power steering. Now, this is 4x4, so you want to do some Hydro Boost brakes along with the power steering. And electronic power steering really isn't going to work unless you just use the Volvo power steering pump. But then you still got power steering fluid and you still got a gearbox. But I don't know of any 4x4 swaps out there that is just full electric power steering on a 4x4. But who knows? They may be out there. And the one I did, I used the Volvo power steering pump, and I used an F250 Super Duty steering gear on an F150, a 79 F150, kind of a high boy type install. And that was with the Battleborn brakes, F250 Super Duty suspension kit, and all that good stuff. That was a fun build. Here's a picture of it right here. I love building that truck. So much fun. All right, where were we at? You're going to need a drive shaft, radiator, all the stuff you needed in the previous stuff, but maybe a little bit more expensive because you want to go with a better brand or higher quality or something like that. Obviously, you still need fluids. You want air conditioning. You want nice tunes in it. You want a good wheel and tire package. If you're going 4x4, maybe you want bead locks. Maybe you don't want bead locks, but you want 33s or 35s on it. Just estimate about $2,500 for that. Now, if you're going to do a high-end steering system, you want it to feel good from the tire all the way to your hand. When you put your hand on the steering wheel, this is a high-end build. You shouldn't feel slop. When you hit a bump, you shouldn't feel the whole steering column flop around in your hand or anything like that. You want a new steering wheel and you want a new steering column. Everything from your knuckles all the way to the pavement. You shouldn't feel slop. It should feel nice and tight. To do that, it costs money, it costs time and parts to get it all installed. So I always do that. If you're going to go with a nice motor and doing a Restomod and you want the modern feel, the modern air conditioning, and then you cheap out on a steering column, you close your eyes and you drive and you're basically still feel like you're driving a 50-year-old truck, right? You don't want that. I also put in a super nice interior kit here. So this is like premium interior kit where you go to like TMI's higher end interior, their budget stuff. I'll reserve my comments for another video. But maybe their higher end stuff, their custom stuff, and Fat Fender Garage, Morgan's, they all do fantastic interior kits, but you're going to pay for it about $10,000 for a nice kit. And you're probably going to want to do dyno matting, steering linkage, miscellaneous electrical doodads and whatnots and gizmos and things like that. All in all, if you were to tally up this budget or this high budget DIY, this isn't if you went to a shop, you're doing all the labor and you're not paying for labor. This is just parts. You're looking at around $54,000 to $60,000 for a high budget build. And I did put a big number in there for paint and body because high budget, you want a nice truck. It's not going to be patina or anything like that. So, and finally the other two. So that was the first three, but the other two build options are not a do-it-yourself. Well, they are kind of. So you have the option to go with like a Porter-built frame, full chassis build, a loaded chassis that Fat Fender Garage calls it. And what that is you can just make a phone call to Fat Fender and give them all your specs, the type of vehicle you have, and they will build a chassis for you with the type of suspension, brand new engine, all the bells and whistles. They'll sell you gauges, they'll sell you a radiator, fuel tanks, and have a rolling chassis that's basically ready to put gas in it and start up. All the brake lines are plumbed. Everything's ready to go. You just need to set your body of your vehicle on top of it and bolt it in and then finish the interior wiring and things like that. And those are great options and a lot of people do them, but they come at a cost. And some people get a lot of sticker shock when they see how much those loaded chassis cost. But if you understand this and what you're really paying for to do it yourself and the amount of hours that you put into using your 50-year-old frame, and a lot of the old foundation of your vehicle, in the long run, you're basically getting a very, very high-end and very capable foundation to set your cab on, and you're not doing any of the work. And you know, those things are going for I think from what I hear, the low end, and it's actually not a bad option. I mean, it sounds like sticker shock, but you've got to understand, you're getting far more than anything that I've just described here. You're getting a brand new vehicle essentially. You're just taking a bunch of sheet metal and setting it on top. So they're extremely capable, extremely reliable, and brand new warranted vehicles essentially. And so that can be a very, very appealing and good option for you. And honestly, I kind of like the idea of not having to do all that work, right? You make a phone call and send them a check, and then they build your chassis for you and ship it to you, and you do the fun stuff of setting the body on top, right, and firing it up. So the other fifth option is going to be, you can buy all this stuff or build your vehicle and send it to a custom shop and have them do the work for you, or a hybrid approach between both of them. Maybe it is you do the motor and trans install, and then you send it somewhere for them to do the full suspension swap. And so there's a number of those shops out there, but obviously they come at a cost. I think it goes without saying that if you did all the work yourself, obviously you're going to save significant amount of money. But if you were to take, for instance, like this high budget build, and you were to do just the Coyote swap yourself, and most of the engine and drivetrain stuff and maybe the interior, it's going to be about half that number of 54 grand. It's going to be around 25 to 30 grand. But then when you have somebody else do the 4x4 suspension and you want to 4-link it and stuff like that, you're going to be back up around $60,000 or maybe even more, depending on what kind of quality you're expecting out of a third-party shop to do some of that work for you. So those are the 5 DIY or hybrid DIY options that are available, and those are honest prices for 2025. So if you have any questions, hit me up. Make sure to like, subscribe, and enjoy the next set of videos that I got coming out.